Welcome back to Murray's Minis. Now, it's not often that something from Age of Sigmar really catches my eye. I'm more of a low fantasy SPG fan. Feel free to rage comment that it's not a real game. I'll be over here not caring. But this time I came across the Mashcrawala Sloggoth. Because Games Workshop really just love to mess with us with all of these trademarkable names. And when I saw it, the first thing I thought was, is that Dobby on crystal meth? Because it looks like Dobby on crystal meth, and he is having a bad time. And this is just the kind of nightmare fuel that no one had asked for. I mean, it actually looks like there are goblins that have kidnapped him that are into horseplay. I mean, it is disgusting and it's wrong, and as soon as I saw it, I wanted it. So, this is me presenting you my meth-loving Dobby. I went with the creepy factor and I just ran with it, really. My wife was watching me paint it and she kind of wasn't paying attention, and then when she actually looked at it, she just went, wow, that is absolutely wrong, that is terrifying. And I really wanted to give the impression that the only sock this particular house elf would ever get would have to be made out of latex, because he's just wrong, there's just something not right about it. So, starting off, black primer all over. And for the skin tones, I decided to go for an undertone of blue because it seemed like the skin tones would be a bit mucky and messy and dirty and grimy and just a bit aged, and like this guy's not particularly having a good time or being very well looked after. I undertoned red for the feet, hands and head, and then slapped over a zenithal coat of white ink over the whole lot, because why bother painting really when you can just spray ink and it does 90% of the work for you? Yeah, seriously, just do this. It works so well. That's why I keep on doing it. And I used a peach skin ink from Dadler and Rowley. Lovely ink on, and I just doused that over all of the flesh tones. I didn't go too heavy because I still wanted to keep a lot of those blue and red and undertones in there. And I used a yellow Liquitex ink over the goblins just to give them some tone. So I used skeleton hold on all of the bones, fingernails, little horny bits that are poking out everywhere, because yeah, nothing says more creepy than horns everywhere. So I used these 3 contrast colours for the wood effects. So Plague Bearer is a really good base tone. I actually learned this trick off of not just Mecha. Marco is an absolutely fantastic painter, absolutely wonderful. You really should check out his channel because the guy's just a master. He makes me look like an absolute cretin. I then layered Nasdaq yellow over the goblins just to give them a little bit of a dark tone, bring them more to a browny, earthy tone, and also accentuate some of the extra details as well. So I used wildwood mixed with a little bit of Vallejo glazing medium for all of the wood. Now for the metal, this is another trick I learned off of Marco and not just Mecha. That is black ink, Vallejo silver and glazing medium, and it essentially just acts as like metallic contrast paint. It is the nuts, you cannot beat it. So my favourite stage of any painting video, and that is the oil washes. You cannot beat oil washes. I absolutely adore them. So I slapped on blue in all of the areas where the blue undertone was, and then I used red for the hands, feet and face. And this is one of those stages where I'm getting a bit better with my use of oil washes. When I first started using them, I tended to make washes that had a very thick consistency, and when you wiped off the excess, it was just a bloody mess, and it looked terrible. I won't lie, it was awful, completely and utterly disgusting. So it's just time and practice with oil washes, and you'll learn the right consistencies for what you want to do. I slapped these oil washes on and I cleaned them off straight away because there was so much white spirit in there. and because I used a relatively thin coat of satin varnish in order to protect and layer it, it didn't need that much time to dry and soak in. So I used a black wash on all of the wood, all of the branches, pretty much the rest of the model except for the metallics, because I went for a different option with there. But this really helped, especially with the yellows. It gave them a lot of deep shadow colours that really accentuated them really good. It darkened down the wood colours as well and just made it look really grimy, dirty, messy, exactly like these guys have come out of a swamp, which is where they're supposed to be coming from. So the colour oil paint I've used here is Abtalung, and oh, I love these paints. They're absolutely stunning. I'm slowly building up my collection of these paints. I've just ordered about another 10 of them because they are stunning, absolutely fantastic paints. They come out of the tube really creamy and nice, and they just blend lovely. A lot better than the cheapo ones that I'm using at the moment. But the cheapo ones are still really good. So I used a mix of 4 different oil washes for the base. It was literally just a green, a brown, a black, and then the same rust colour I used for the metallics, and just dilute them down with white spirit and just wet blend the base with all of these different tones, and you end up with a very, very natural looking, realistic base colour. It's a really good little trick. Actually, you can get some really nice effects with it. At this point I kind of realised that some of my oil washes weren't blended very well, so I went back in with the reds and the blues just to give it a little bit more of a natural effect. There was a bit of too much of a step change between the red and the blue, and it didn't look as natural as it should do, which is a bit of a non-starter with beast and fleshed kite models. So this is what it looked like after all of the oil washes had dried. I left it overnight, and it's a very, very well blended. You could absolutely leave it like this and call it quits and have a model like this painted in no time. So originally I had thought about doing all of the highlights, skin tones and everything with oil paints, but I ended up changing my mind because I started doing it on some of the flesh tones, and with oil paints you can get some really nice blends, very, very smooth effects. But because the effects that I had already had were already looking pretty good, and I didn't want to wipe away a lot of that work, and I also wanted to keep this to a speed painting tutorial. I mean, in total I've probably spent about 4 hours painting this model to a pretty decent standard that you could stick on a table and it would still look really, really good. So I decided to ditch the oil highlights and just go straight with scale 75 artist colours. I absolutely adore these paints. They are fantastic. They are gorgeous paints and they are beautiful. They work really well for glazing, highlights, and you can't go wrong with them. So with this new change of plan, I decided to bust out my wet palette and actually use the colours that I had already used previously from painting my Wolf's Bear Kill team. They'd been in the palette for about 3 days, but because the lid was closed, they were absolutely fine. They needed a little bit of water to liven them up again. They were a little bit globby and thick in places, but with a little bit of mixing, they were absolutely fine. So I used a very, very peach flesh tone for some of the darker areas, and then with the proper highlights I used a very, very pale elf skin tone. And it was at this point I realised I was absolutely on to the right choice here, because I have a very short attention span. I struggle to paint like long-term projects. I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit on the spectrum or not, or whether I just get really bored and I'm really restless. But with just a couple of highlights, it really brought everything together. There's already so much smooth blending with all of the oil washes and the airbrush layers with this, that there were all of those delicate blends underneath, and all it needed was just a couple of little pops of really bright colour to bring the whole thing out. And I'm so glad I opted with this in the end, because I got a pretty decently well painted model, and I could do my signature scratchy, dirty highlighting because of my shaky hands that I can kind of get away with on a monster miniature like this, which you can't get away with on Marines as much. I actually really enjoyed painting this model. It was so much fun. I haven't painted a monster miniature like this in a very, very long time. On the Goblin Skin, so I actually used just a pale creamy colour. I don't have the Scale 75 Artist Yellows yet. I have ordered them today because there was payday, so hopefully on the next video after this you should see me using a lot more of those Scale 75 colours. I cannot wait to get at them. So I stippled a reddy brown just to get that red colour off because it was a little bit too vibrant for my liking. On the wood I used the same cream colour that I'd used for the highlights on the goblins, just on the very, very tips of where the wood washes were at their absolute brightest. So this wasn't like an all over thing. I'm literally pointing and poking out only the really brightest areas in order to get these highlights to work. When you've airbrushed to this level and you're doing a speed painting, sometimes you can get away with one highlight just in the highest points and it will work pretty well without much problem. So with all of the like string, baggage, all of the ladders and stuff, I just used a generic brown. And then when it came to the metallics, I used Vallejo Silver. This is one of my favourite paints. I haven't tried out the true metallic stuff as well, but I've heard they're really, really good. They're probably going to be on my list of paints to buy, which is massive as we speak. Absolutely ridiculous how many paints I have on my list to buy. So that's probably not going to be this month, but hopefully soon. So I went in very, very slapdash because it's already very, very rusted metal, so you can get away with it being pretty slapdash. But there you go. I was actually really, really pleased with how quick this came together, and now I want another one and everything else that the Cruel Boys have, because their range is just really, really cool. I love that sort of blend of the SBG aesthetic with the Warhammer Fantasy Orc aesthetic. I just think they look absolutely the nuts, and I'm really, really tempted to get more because I just love them. So there we go, guys. That's how to paint a marshmallow. That's right, it's a marshmallow. Mashcrawala Sloggoth, for crying out loud. Bloody Games Workshop. Yeah. Let me know if there are any other fantasy AOS miniatures that you would like to see me paint. Maybe another monster miniature. I think I want to probably try something a little bit bigger in scale with these techniques because it really works very, very well, and I'm really pleased with the results of it. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you really want to support the channel, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It would mean an awful lot, and it would also help with how this channel gets funded, because at the moment I'm in the process of pretty much selling most of the miniatures that I paint in order to carry on with the flow of models coming in that I can paint and then present to you guys. So if you do want to support the channel, it'd be very, very much appreciated. Thank you very much, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.